then the last term within the social foundation of deviance is in relationship to power and the power struggle. Sociologists look at how people in power are able to define who's deviant. They have the power to influence policies, laws, procedures, not just because of their status, but they have the resources to do that. And so, how we come up with laws that seem to punish a particular group of people or a segment of society. Sociologists look at that. Where did that law come from? How did it originate? Who had the power to create it? Why are they creating it? And how it might marginalize or oppress other groups of people who do not have that power. So that's kind of an overview of the fundamentals of the concepts and terms that you'll need to understand the social issues as we go through the module on crime and violence. And then from there, the module is broken down into segments of specific issues. So the first one really looks at state violence. So government-sponsored violence, so things like declaration of war, military force, as well as like creating the military-industrial complex, the power that the military and the people that operate within that framework of the government, the power that they have, where that power comes from, those kinds of things. And then it goes on to looking at terrorism and genocide as acts of violence. There's a great application on page 84. It's a sociological application 5.2, and it's called Labeling Terrorist. And that is a really interesting concept about how, depending on where you live, you get exposed to terrorism in the media, and then how that inflicts your mind to picture. We come to think that terrorists are a particular label, like they look a certain way, they're of a specific religious background, a specific gender. And so this exercise is really good because it takes you and looks at some different sites about who the terrorists really are, especially we're looking at the United States, the number of terrorist incidents, what characteristics make those individuals and how sometimes we mislabel individuals. So that's a great exercise. I recommend completing it. And then we go into genocide and we look at the different demographics and data available on genocide, and then which leads us into then as well as predatory violence. A lot of these things are connected because violence with intent, with a goal in mind, is considered predatory violence. So sometimes when we talk about predatory violence, we tend to think about the rapist, we think about the individual criminal, or sometimes we think we're taking it in regards to like a mass shooter. But this also impacts terrorism. It can filter into state violence as well. That if we have a goal in mind, as far as like the specific nature of the violent attack, and that we know we want a specific outcome, it can fall under predatory violence. So that's an important section there as well. And then also we've included a site that lets you look at a little bit of the gun control debate and the role of guns in violence. And then it goes into infanticide, which is an area that we hear a lot about as far as when we're thinking about people choosing whether to abort a pregnancy or not. And so what happens is people tend to identify that infanticide is abortion, but it's not. It's actually the murder or killing of a child from 1 week old to a year old. And it is a custom that is still practiced based on a lot of factors. It's not just tradition or cultural practices, but it can be because you're faced with other social ailments or issues, that it's basically the killing of an unwanted child for different justification and different reasons. And we do talk a little bit in here about China, preferring a particular sex of child, but then we do go into the United States and some of the factors that have led parents to kill their children. So that's really interesting. And then we go into like the death penalty and executions and different types of executions. And there's a great little image that we've included on page 89 to understand the different types of executions and how they might occur. And then a great website is by Professor Mentor. I also recommend that you complete Sociological Application 5.3 because it really gives you a good foundation about the death penalty. Does it work? Those kinds of things. It looks at it statistically with research and stuff, and it's a great little website. And then we go into modern slavery and the different types of modern slavery, whether it be forced labor or as well as sex trafficking and things like that. And we ask students to really consider the impacts of slavery, not just socially on the individuals involved, but what impact that does have, like on our politics, our laws, our economy. And there's a little exercise on page 92, a sociological application 5.4 that we recommend. And then the module actually goes into, at this point, what we call organizational deviance, which is really like people in groups collectively being deviant, with a focus on white-collar crimes, elite deviants, people who have power and then exploit the system or try to alter their punishments for committing crimes. And then the different types of crimes, white-collar crimes that exist. There's an image with the white-collar crimes on page 83 on the bottom, just in case you're not sure what they are, but they include things like fraud, embezzlement, and you can see those. And then from there going into organizational deviance and then looking at the prison industrial complex, how the prison system works and basically uses the population to continue its capitalist prospects and things like that, how to profit off of prisoners and things like that. So it is a discussion. I know it's controversial, but it's just an examination of the issue and what some of the controversies are about the issue and the impact that it has on society. So that's in here. And then we go into like technology-based deviance, whether it be combat drones, unmanned drones, sorry, they are armed, unmanned drones, and the implications of that, of not having a human actually in the cockpit responsible for using weapons violently, but that these are miles away, they're remotely controlled. So looking at that, as well as privacy on the internet, and then as well as like cyber crimes and cyberbullying. And we have a lot of statistics that we include on page 101 about cyberbullying, as well as an exercise about that with a segment of a video and the impact cyberbullying has on children and youth particularly. Then the module ends up like our modules typically do, so make sure that you're completing and evaluating your critical thinking and credibility. So we ask you to think about those different social issues, look at what ethnocentric, sociocentric, or egocentric tendencies you have, maybe some fallacies that you discovered once you were looking at the data and things you didn't consider. And then how these different aspects affect the diversity of our population. So asking you to really take an examination of that. And then the theories, this section is a little deeper than it has been in the past modules because there are sub-theories when we're looking at crime and violence. This is a highly studied, researched area. So within functionalism, you'll see that there's sub-theories on the social disorganization, culture of deviance, and strain theory that you'll see under functionalism. And then under interactionism, you'll see things like labeling theory, differential association, and control theory. I've made separate videos on the deviance theories, so make sure that you watch that video to give you a deeper understanding and explanation of the sub-theories. I cover the overarching 6 theories, but also then the 6 sub-theories that fall under functionalism and interactionism. So make sure you view that. And then the module ends looking at some policy initiatives and some social movements around the issues. So take some time and make sure that you're evaluating those to kind of see the direction we're going. There's a great video link about how some students have gotten involved in changing policy related to crime and violence and things like that. So take a look at that. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know and we'll schedule